That is so dumb.
Thebausffs is one of the most popular streamers on Twitch. He's also achieved the rank of Challenger multiple seasons in a row on the Europe West server, which is arguably the second most difficult server in the world. But by far, his most impressive achievement is hitting Challenger on the Korean server in less than a month. I really can't overemphasize just how insane of an accomplishment that is. But before we teach you how to play like Thebausffs, we should probably first know how to actually pronounce his name. Well, let's ask him.
How do you say Thebausffs? Thebausffs. Or you can say the bussy FF.
Yeah, I'm not going to be calling him that, so I'll stick with Thebausffs. So I think for many players, Thebausffs is kind of an enigma, and it's for good reasons. When he streams, he comes across as an entertainer first, and so I can see how many players would make the mistake of thinking he's not one of the best solo queue players in the game, that he's just, well, a funny streamer. But then he goes and gets Challenger in Korea in under a month, and you're like, okay, this guy is actually insanely good. You then combine this with his unorthodox champion pools he's played over the years, mainly Sion and Gragas, and top it off with a very unique playstyle that looks like he's inting on purpose half of the time. And yeah, it starts to make sense why there's a ton of confusion surrounding him. And that's actually how this guide was born. We wanted to do a deep dive into what is obviously one of the best solo queue players and break down what he does to win games in a clear and simple manner for you, the viewer, to understand and implement in your own games. And by the way, simplifying League of Legends is what makes our teaching at skillcap.com so effective. We know how hard it is to climb in lower ranks with terrible teammates. It's why we take the extra time and effort to actually test what we teach you. For example, for this video, I jumped on a fresh account and was able to achieve a 90% win rate over 20 games, implementing exactly what you're about to learn. I then broke down these games that I played in the ranks that you're stuck in nearly 2 hours of additional content only found on our website. Not only do we have over 280 high-quality courses taught by Challenger experts covering every role and skill you need to learn in order to rank up, but we also release 10 new Smurf commentaries every week where a Challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank that you're stuck in. And by the way, those same Challenger experts will answer any and all questions that you have. If you're looking for something more personal though, well, then we got you covered with coaching from our trained Challenger experts. If all of this wasn't enough, we're also backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you just get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. Alright, so let's get started on how to play like Thebausffs. Now, you probably think the most logical place to start would be the laning phase. Well, as we analyzed his games, we started to notice an interesting trend in how he laned.
I'm dead. Did he hit level 3 before he was supposed to? Did he get level 1 experience that I didn't account for? I think he got some type of experience level... No, but he has no assist or kills. Ah, that's weird. I must have miscalculated that.
5 minutes later.
And now he's out-leveling me. I thought I was stomping him. I've only outplayed him this game. How am I losing? How am I behind? I did so well in this lane.
Okay, but seriously, it's not like he loses every lane. But what honestly started becoming a bit strange was how often he would lose lane into then winning the game in the end. And it's not like he was being carried during these types of games. He would often be the one putting down pressure and the main cause of the win, despite losing his lane early on. After seeing this enough times though, it became clear he was executing a very specific strategy that was both extremely powerful, but also unique. The way he wins games isn't during the laning phase, it's entirely macro based once the laning phase ends, and these macro plays he uses don't require him to win lane, which makes his impact extremely consistent game to game. And after analyzing dozens and dozens of his games, I would say there are two main pillars to Thebausffs' strategy. And the first one is his use of teleport.
Oh, this guy doesn't have TP. Oh, never mind, I'm good. We're good, never mind. Guy doesn't play with TP, he plays with Ignite.
So, Thebausffs really values teleport, but it's not for the reasons you think. You may be imagining that the reason he values teleport is so that he can impact the rest of the map and help his team. Well, that could not be further from the truth.
I don't think they're on this. Who's pinging? Who's pinging this? Who's making me TP for nothing?
Instead, Thebausffs uses teleport primarily for two reasons. The first is to stabilize his laning. If he ever dies or has to take a bad recall, teleport will allow him to get back to lane without missing out on a big wave. This is actually very important for him, as it means when he does die or misplays in lane, that he doesn't get punished nearly as hard. You can think of this as his way of manipulating plays so that he can do what on the surface looks like a risky play, but then minimize that risk by having teleport as his backup plan. For example, as early as level 1, he can be seen taking risky early game fights. I mean, on the surface, this really just does look like a pure fiesta, just complete chaos. But if it goes well, obviously that'd be great for him. But if it goes bad, well, he can always still just TP back to lane to make sure he doesn't miss any minions. Compare this to the enemy who doesn't have teleport. If the play goes well for them, well, they would still get that same reward that the boss would. But if it goes bad, they get punished way harder as they can't get back to lane in time and will end up losing minions. And that concept is actually a core part of why he can, well, die so much. I mean, on his grind to Challenger in Korea, he literally averaged over 9 deaths a game and his KDA just looked abysmal. Let me show you an example. In this game, he's in a winning lane position against the enemy Yone. However, the enemy jungle, mid lane, and support are all missing off the map. Now, if we followed standard League fundamentals, we'd back off here. Yone has no more minions to CS, so he shouldn't move forward to even be in range of us. At the same time, our own support is very far off the map, our mid lane is still in lane, and our jungler isn't close enough to counter gank fast enough. And yet, the boss doesn't care about any of those fundamentals, he plays hyper aggressive. This then pulls the enemy support. Now, this is super important, so listen up. Notice how he pulls Karma here. Meanwhile, his own support is heading back to bot. The enemy AD carry is going to have a nightmare of a time laning 1 versus 2 against a Caitlyn and Lux since they won't have their Karma support in lane. This is a good example of what we'll call pressure in League. The boss is honestly kind of the king of applying pressure. Again, you can see how even with Karma here, and with him being low on health, he moves forward aggressively. A little reminder here, the enemy mid lane and jungle are still missing, which is a huge red flag. But to simplify this concept, I want you to think of 2 outcomes that could happen when he goes aggressive. The first scenario, no one else comes. This is super winning for the boss, as he can either kill Yone or just stop his back and zone him from his tower, deny CS, take plates, all while keeping Karma busy, doing nothing topside. The second scenario is, well, someone on the enemy team comes and the boss dies. In a way, there's a risk and a reward. The way boss cheats the system with teleport is that he's keeping the reward the same, but if things do go wrong, well, the risk isn't as bad as you'd think. In this case, he gets the second scenario. He dies to the enemy Master Yi completely for free. And it's not like he trades kills or gets anything super valuable off of this in terms of gold or XP. However, here's the secret to why his playstyle with teleport is so strong in solo queue. He just pulled both Karma and Master Yi to his lane. This will now give information to his own jungler to know what the best play is. It also wastes the enemy's time and lets his own laners play freely without the risk of a jungle gank. And of course, it also lets his bot lane just stomp 2v1. Now, instead, think if Master Yi ganked mid successfully. When Vex dies, well, they'll have to walk all the way back to their lane and will be losing minions to their tower during that time, falling even further behind. But since the boss takes teleport, he can absorb that gank and minimize his losses by teleporting back to lane and only losing 1 melee minion instead of an entire wave. Now, remember, I said there were 2 parts to this, and that was just the first part. The second part is that by teleporting back to lane, he's back into applying that pressure we talked about. You see, usually when the enemy gets a kill like they did on the boss, they get something called a tempo advantage. Basically, while a player is dead, the other team can use that death timer to get ahead on the map. And when you break this down into actual numbers, it becomes much clearer. For example, the boss died, so his death timer was 20 seconds. Now, on average, if you have boots upgraded, it will typically take around 20 seconds to walk from the fountain to your outer top tower as well. So, a simple way of understanding this would be to say, at this time in the game, off this kill, the enemy should get a tempo advantage of about 40 seconds. However, since the boss has teleport, their tempo advantage gets reduced down to 24 seconds, as that 20 seconds it takes to walk back to lane gets reduced to the 4 seconds it will take to channel teleport. So, not only are we able to reduce the risk of playing more aggressive by preventing us from losing minions to the tower, but we also reduce the amount of tempo the enemy gains off the kill. You can see how this increase in his own tempo immediately gets converted into more experience and gold for him. He's able to clear a wave as soon as it arrives in lane, and turn that into a push to secure a turret plate, all before the enemy Yone can even get back to his own tower. It's almost as if Yone was the one who died and lost tempo in this scenario. Now, it's not just that he uses teleport in this more abstract sense of reducing how much he's punished for playing aggressive and applying pressure. There's also this very specific tactic we saw him use a lot in lane. So, in this clip, we're even with the enemy, but Gragas has teleport while the Aatrox took ignite. When he's in these positions, he plays super aggressive, but not because of the point we made earlier. You see, as he engages here on the Aatrox, he actually knows he won't win this 1v1. What he's trying to do is trade health as much as possible. This way, both players are low on health, and he can go off and recall, and then teleport back to lane. This puts the enemy in a horrible position, as without teleport of their own, they're now either going to die to an all-in once the boss is back, or they would have to take a recall of their own, in which case the boss gets to deny a wave to the tower, take turret plates, apply pressure, and get ahead in tempo that he values so much. You can see how not only does this play set up an easy kill on Aatrox for his Twitch support, but for the subsequent fight that breaks out, the boss is full health, mana, and just spent all his gold on items, so it's a massive swing in the game. And it doesn't stop here either. He also uses teleport the complete opposite way most people do in the mid game. Well, let's just have him explain it.
I'm a big fan of TPing to lane and then running down to the objective. So TP to top lane and then run down to dragon. I'm a big fan of that. I don't like to TP to objectives. I did some mad damage.
This is actually such a game-changing tip once you truly understand it, so let's compare each option. First, we could walk to lane, push it out, then teleport to a dragon fight that breaks out. In this scenario, assuming the enemy top laner makes the same play, there's no real advantage gained or created, as both laners would teleport to the fight at the same time. Compare this to the second option. We can teleport to the lane and then push it out so that the enemy is pinned to the tower. We then walk to the dragon so we can get control early before the fight breaks out. By doing this, we get that tempo lead on the opponent. Notice how by teleporting to lane, he now gets to be the first person to push out the lane. This effectively pins Yone down to top lane to farm those minions for a moment. This is what allows you to rotate and get to the fight first. This is what's key. By walking there instead of teleporting, it allows us to get control of the area with our team since there's a man advantage. If you only rely on teleport, well, your team would have to essentially be good enough or ahead enough to get control of the area on their own 4v4. And then you also need them to set up a ward for you to teleport to, which is just all very unlikely to happen in solo queue. You can see how important it is to get control of the area, as now the enemy is the one who has to face check Fog of War, and is exactly why he's able to be so impactful in this fight. So, before we move on to the next section, let's just quickly recap what we've learned. First, even though you'd think taking a combat summoner like Ignite would win you lane, teleport can be just as lane winning. It will allow you to set up kills with the tactic we highlighted, trading health into recalling and teleporting back to lane, but it also lets you play way more aggressive, apply pressure, and absorb ganks. When you inevitably die sometimes, teleport reduces how much you are actually punished. And third, you want to use teleport to get back to your lane faster so that you can immediately get back into applying pressure by pushing minions into the tower. This will effectively increase your tempo across the game, which sets you up to roam and get to fights before your opponent. Alright, and so with that out of the way, if you really asked me to define the boss's playstyle by one singular concept, it would be pressure. And don't worry, I'm not going to just leave it there in some kind of vague sense of the word. We're going to dive into the specific tactics that he uses to successfully apply this pressure concept. One of his main strategies going into every game is to try and apply pressure with the goal of pulling the enemy jungler or other laners to him. Let me show you. So here's an extremely common scenario. We have the boss on Gragas, he's taken top tower and is now pushing a wave to the second tower. Now, as this wave hits the second tower, try to think about what your options are to get some kind of advantage if you're the Gragas. 1, we could start trying to damage the tower. Well, that's just not a good idea, as Ezreal will just damage us from range, and we'll eventually either die or have to leave from being so low. 2, we could rotate off this push, pinning Ezreal down with a wave and looking for a number advantage fight elsewhere. A great idea in principle, but there just simply isn't any objective on the map or fight for us to rotate to. Or 3, we could take the enemy jungle camps between waves. Well, none of the enemy jungle camps are alive on this side of the map, so we can't do that. So it looks like there's nothing for us to do, right? Well, here's the boss's main strategy. Even though he can't do much, he's going to play hyper aggressive within vision of the enemy to try and lure them towards him. In this example, you can see how this involves trying to go aggressive on Ezreal. And what do you know? He dies for free, and it looks like this was a terrible play. But keep in mind, he pulled 3 people top, Ezreal, Syndra, and Aatrox. This means his bot lane now has a number advantage, so they can take that bot tower for free. And he got summoner spells from Ezreal. This results in his Twitch actually getting an easy kill on him in top lane shortly after. Now, I know, a lot of you are thinking, okay, that just randomly worked out for him, or maybe you're thinking, yeah, but my teammates suck and wouldn't do anything off of this pressure, things like that. Well, don't worry, we'll explain all of that shortly, but the reason we started with this clip is that this is what a lot of his gameplay looks like, him dying for what seems to be nothing. However, when you then just look a little bit underneath the surface, you realize his team actually gained a lot. That was just one example though, so to prove I'm not cherry picking, let's take a look at another. In this clip, he ends up taking a winning team fight. Now, notice how after this fight, he doesn't stay grouped with his team or go to help take Herald, he immediately clicks to go to a side lane to start applying his pressure strategy. He pushes the wave, starts threatening damage on the tower, and he successfully pulls both Syndra and Swain. Then the typical solo queue chaos occurs, his Pyke dies for free, but none of that really matters. The point is, he continues to apply pressure with a pushed wave, threatening either a dive on Syndra or tower damage. This once again pulls Swain to him, gets his ult, Ignite, and he's able to escape. Now, I bet a lot of you guys missed what happened on the minimap during that time. His Twitch was actually able to get another kill on the enemy Ezreal. Usually, an enemy support, such as the Swain, would group with their AD carry, but by applying pressure and pulling Swain towards him, it results in Ezreal being alone and vulnerable to being killed. Essentially, one core idea behind his pressure is to both pull enemy champions and then escape so that they've wasted their time. This then gives a natural advantage to the rest of his team. However, in practice, this doesn't always work out and can often look like he's just inting. For example, here he's playing Rammus. He looks to proxy farm between the tower and successfully pulls the enemy jungler. Again, this is the first part of our goal. The second is to escape, but he fails and dies for free. He respawns, teleports back to lane, and immediately goes into trying to proxy again. However, well, let's just roll the clip.
Look, this guy's blocking on purpose, man. Oh my god, I thought I had leveled up my R, but I hadn't. Fuck.
Yeah, again, looks like he just ended for no reason. So he respawns, gets back to lane, and he just continues with the same goal, apply pressure and pull enemies towards him. This time it actually works. We spot the enemy jungler and are able to escape safely, wasting their time. Again, after recalling, we head back to lane. In this case, our Jax jungle got the enemy gangplank low on health, and so we look to execute a dive. Now, this dive would have worked if the enemy jungler didn't show up. Again, we're forcing the enemy jungler to come to our lane and pulling pressure. The boss is now 0-3, and honestly, if you looked at his deaths in a vacuum, it kind of looks like he's inting on purpose. We respawn, and again, the same plan. We're not stopping it just because we're dying, or else the entire plan will fail. We have to continue applying pressure regardless of our deaths. He tries to proxy farm, completely fails, tries to escape with ult, and then dies for free again.
Worf.
Respawn, back to the same strategy. We do our best to push waves into the tower. This effectively pins down the laner so we can't use his lead to impact the rest of the map, and then we try to proxy farm. We successfully pull both the enemy jungler and the enemy mid laner, and in the end, even the enemy support. Keep in mind, that means 4 people came to kill a Rammus that is 0-4, so he's not even worth that much gold at this point. Respawn, and we're back to pushing and applying pressure. However, now we get to see what happens when the enemy decides not to respond and instead looks to impact the map elsewhere with their lead. The boss is able to farm 3 waves by himself, then take the tower into a 4th wave, and then threatening the 2nd tower into a 5th wave. This is why the enemy has to respond to his pressure. If they don't, he's going to just take towers and generate a ton of gold. And it's very important you guys understand the following. This strategy will only work when you never stop applying pressure regardless of how many times you die. Keep in mind, he's literally 0 kills, 5 deaths, 0 assists, and has done nothing but die up until this point. But what you're about to see is how despite this, he's going to continue with his pressure strategy and will actually win the game doing it. Before we do that though, let's just quickly simplify the strategy so it's super easy to understand. Your goal is to push the wave and be in an aggressive position on the map. You then have 4 options from that position. The first is tower dive the enemy. For example, in this game with him on Sion, it's around 17 minutes into the game, and yes, he has already died 7 times. He pushes the wave to apply pressure, and the enemy makes the mistake of trying to defend that pressure with a level 10 Ashe. In this scenario, when he can kill the enemy, he'll always go for the tower dive to punish that enemy's mistake. The second option is to then pull the enemy with the goal of escaping. We saw this earlier. He pushed bot side aggressively and could potentially have a tower dive on the Syndra, but it quickly pivots into the second option of pulling pressure and escaping. This then gave his team a number advantage on the rest of the map, setting up winning plays for them indirectly. The third option is, as we just recently saw, involves taking waves and towers for free if the enemy doesn't respond to defend our pressure. And this leaves the final option, pushing into roaming. So in this example, with the enemy having just respawned, we know they're going to head top to pick up the waves we just pushed into the tower. Instead of trying to absorb that pressure, we can use the wave we pushed to lure an enemy, then rotate off to get a number advantage fight elsewhere. In this case, we rotate mid since this is where our team is pressuring, and so naturally a fight could break out. We then spot the enemy Bel'Veth top, so we now successfully lured her there with the wave. So we can now look for that play on mid lane, and it results in us getting a kill and putting Lucian extremely low. And in essence, it's really that simple. You push to get into a pressure position. You then rotate between those 4 tactics. If no one defends, continue pushing to take towers and minions. If they send someone weak to defend, you then tower dive them. If your teammates are applying pressure nearby, then you can push into roaming for a man advantage. And if none of those options are available, we can simply apply pressure with the goal of luring multiple enemies and escaping. And that's pretty much the core macro strategy you run until the game ends if you want to play like the boss. Well, almost. There's one main exception to the rules we just listed: dragon fights. The boss really values grouping for dragon fights. For example, here he is pushing a side lane, looking to apply pressure, and, well, let's just have him explain.
Let's get out of here. Dragon is spawning soon, it's important, I'm healthy for it. It's very important to keep your health healthy. Your health in a good shape, or whatever you call it.
Alright, well that was some amazing insights, but in all seriousness, he'll use a specific tactic around Dragon. We actually saw this earlier, where he used his teleport to push out top, and then implement a push into roam to Dragon. Remember, what's important is that we get to Dragon early so we can set up control. This will increase your chances to win the ensuing fight, since the enemy will have to move into Fog of War. We see that exact same tactic being applied here, where he pushes out the side lane, then recalls early. This way he can get to the dragon before it spawns. The side waves buy him time needed to get to the dragon before the enemy, as one of the enemies gets pinned down by the wave. Now, with the enemy having to move into Fog of War, he once again gets the jump on them, being a huge contributing factor to him winning the fight. And what do you think he does immediately after? Teleports to mid lane to head straight back into his pressure strategy. Alright, now there's just one more thing you need to learn in order to play like the boss, his champion pool. You see, there are definitely some concepts we've taught you in this video that you can apply literally on any champion. His usage of teleport, pushing into roaming, tower diving when possible, and taking towers and minions when the enemy doesn't defend, but there's one key part of his strategy that's much more champion dependent, pulling multiple enemies and then escaping. If you look at the top champions the boss has played during the preseason, it becomes clear that he values champions that can pull pressure and then escape. Gragas is arguably the king of this, as with enough cooldown reduction, he just spams his abilities to easily escape in a ton of spots, not to mention how much his ultimate can help. Rammus is also quite good at this, as both his ultimate and Q ability can be fantastic forms of escape. And his most famous champion, Sion, can not only escape easily with his ultimate, but his passive allows him to just trade kills instead of having to escape when enemies collapse. It's also worth noting he takes Phase Rush on both Sion and Gragas. This, along with other benefits, can help him escape when he doesn't have access to his ultimate or flash. And another thing that these champions have is great engage when he executes that push into roam tactic. And so, if you want to replicate his playstyle one for one, these would be the champions that we recommend you play. Don't get us wrong though, there are still plenty of other champions that can implement this strategy. Kazante, Riven, Fiora, the majority of champions in top lane will find success replicating what you've learned. Proof of that is one of the boss's favorite champions to play is Quinn, which really doesn't have a ton in common with champions like Gragas and Rammus, but he still makes it work with his playstyle. However, the champions we've listed here are the ones he's either the most well known for playing, or are simply the closest fit to the playstyle we went over. However, with all of that being said, there are still other champions the boss has played that don't completely fit this mold. A great example of that is Karthus top, where instead of pulling enemies to escape, he actually intends to die and trade one for one pretty much every time. If you want to replicate that playstyle, where you go for a more aggressive approach, where you don't try to escape and instead trade one for one, well, we recommend the following champions. To be honest though, don't get too wrapped up in this. His playstyle can work on the vast majority of champions. Alright, and with all of that out of the way, let's quickly recap how to play like the boss. First, your goal is not to get kills or win lane. Your goal is to be constantly applying pressure to the enemy team. We apply pressure by first pushing waves to the enemy's tower and then threaten the following 4 tactics. If no one defends, continue pushing to take towers and minions. If they send someone weak to defend, then tower dive. If your teammates are applying pressure nearby, then push into roaming for a man-advantaged fight. And if none of those options are available, try to apply pressure with the goal of luring multiple enemies and escaping, or at least trading one for one. Additionally, make sure you take teleport as one of your summoner spells. This will allow you to play more aggressive, apply pressure, and when you inevitably absorb a gank or die, you'll be punished less by being able to get back to lane faster. The one exception to all of this is dragon fights. As long as your team isn't too far behind, look to prepare to rotate to dragon early. Push the wave first to set up your rotation. This will pin an enemy down and allow you to get to the dragon fight early enough to gain control of the area, forcing the enemy to face check into Fog of War. This will massively increase your odds of winning that fight. And there you go, that's how you play like the boss. If you like this guide and would like to see more like it, well, then let us know in the comment section below what player you'd like us to analyze next. Also, as a fun fact, as part of the research for this guide, I went on a fresh account to try out what we've taught here, and it was not only one of the most effective strategies we've ever tested with a 90% win rate over 20 games, but it was also some of the most fun I've ever had in solo queue. I've actually broken down these games in nearly 2 hours of additional content only found on our website, skillcap.com, where I teach you how to apply what you've just learned in the ranks you're stuck in. Keep in mind, we also have over 280 high-quality courses taught by challenger experts covering every role and skill you need to learn in order to rank up. We also release 10 new Smurf commentaries every week where a challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank that you're stuck in. And those same challenger experts will answer any and all questions you have. If you're looking for something more personal instead, well then we got you covered with coaching from our trained challenger experts. If all of this wasn't enough, we're also backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. Alright, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.